What about the arrests that they're reporting in Iceland?
That's right. One of the bankers in London, who they say, and rightfully so, was responsible for pilfering $2 billion from the economy, is now being prosecuted. And, it's funny because London is where a lot of these guys go. Because the hedge fund industry and the banking industry laws are very lenient there, and you end up with a lot of the international banking crooks end up in London, which is one of the reasons why the real estate market in London, on the high end, the very expensive residencies, hasn't crashed so much, because they're supported by all these billionaires from these territories that they've absconded with all the wealth. So Iceland is actively going after this guy, and it's funny because in the indictment they use a very interesting word, Alex. They use the word counterfeiting. Now, this is fascinating because counterfeiting in the context of financial crime and financial terrorism, it points to what people know as naked short selling. Naked short selling is really one of the most common incendiary financial devices used to blow up an economy and to blow up a country, to blow up a company. We saw with Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns, naked short selling. You're selling something, you're selling a security that doesn't exist, which is the same as counterfeiting. So now, if they bring this whole naked short selling scam to the surface and they call it what it is, counterfeiting, that would point the finger at a lot of the criminality that's gone on in the last 5 to 10 years, and really bring in all the banks, because they're all guilty of this naked short selling to a huge degree. Now, getting back to your question about, well, the leaders, once they take on Wall Street, are they going to be pressured to back down? And what we saw last Thursday on May 6th was the first unequivocal domestic financial terrorist attack in America. There was a bill in Washington to break up the big banks. They dropped the market by 1,000 points. The lawmakers pulled away. They decided not to pass that law to break up the big banks.
They also dropped the real law at the Fed and put a fake one in, according to Ron Paul.
Yeah, so they've got this weapon, which is they can crash a market. And I'm looking at today's news, and you see now that the financial terrorists are not shy about threatening to blow up people's economies and markets. For example, this is in today's news, Morgan Stanley said that if Europe doesn't engage in full-blown quantitative easing, which means that they would buy back their own bonds, which basically would mean to destroy the euro, then Morgan Stanley threatens Europe with a 1987 crash. Look this up. Morgan Stanley, full-blown quantitative easing may be needed to save Europe, or else we'll see a 1987-style crash. So they're threatening Europe with a 1987 crash. That's Morgan Stanley, a Wall Street bank, is threatening the entire Eurozone. Here's another headline about KPMG and PricewaterhouseCoopers are now considering whether or not they should get back into the business of the rating agencies. The Moody's, S&P, and Fitch, those rating agencies that gave their blessing to all the structured products and collateralized debt obligations that turned out to be phony. Well, now all these consulting firms, who are also equally culpable in this nightmare collapse of the economy, say, well, those guys aren't good enough at it. We're going to get into the business. So this is like really just exactly the same thing. The fact that they can, with a straight face, say that they're going to get into the rating agency business when they themselves are some of the most crooked organizations in the U.S. economy, KPMG and Pricewaterhouse, is quite laughable. Here you have General Motors today saying that they want to get back into the financing business because of the shortage of subprime lending is holding back sales. Now, General Motors getting into the financing business is exactly how the economy crashed to begin with, because they got out of selling cars and they got into the loan sharking business. Then the economy crashed. Then the government gave them billions, and as a thank you to the taxpayer for getting them out of the hole, they're saying now we want to get back into the loan sharking business. That only took 12 months.
Yeah, we're not going to build cars. We're going to move our factories to Asia, to Brazil, and to China, and to Eastern Europe. And then all we're going to do with your bailout money here is loan it back to you, the American people.
At usurious rates, as a loan shark, and we're trying to get you deeper into debt as we possibly can. And so they're trying to restart the entire cycle of, again, until they blow up, and then they'll require more of a bailout. And, of course, this just perpetuates this move down into what we call the casino gulag state, where the value of the purchasing power, the wages and the savings and the purchasing power of everybody in the U.S. keeps continuously degrades and drops and disintegrates, and you have this just an enormous cesspool where once a fine country used to reside.
Max, I talked to one of my neighbors. I talked to other people, that are somewhat successful in business in Austin, and they say, well, I'm not in the stock market, so I don't care what these big banks are doing. And I don't understand this yuppie, pre-programmed arrogance where you try to warn people that and they act like it's weak to even care or even be involved in society as long as they think they're doing okay. I mean, everyone is connected to the stock market. Everyone is connected to the currencies. Everyone is connected through taxes with these trillions of dollars of, quote, bailouts used for bonuses. I mean, what do you call that mindset where people don't understand the incredible magnitude of what's happening in global markets right now and where this is leading us?
Well, you can explain it in the following way. The average experience of the average American is masked to a large degree by the fact that most people in America are unaware of the benefits accrued to them because the world reserve currency is the U.S. dollar. So there is no radical currency risk that you see in other countries and the currency collapses that you see in other countries. And it also means that things like gasoline are incredibly cheap in America relative to other countries. Now, what is going to happen, what people on your show are talking about, and what I've been talking about, and what I see over here in Europe, is that the U.S. dollar as reserve currency is going to be replaced with a new global currency, and that at that moment then Americans will experience what everyone else in the world experiences, which is radical currency risk and all kinds of bank shenanigans, including paying state, local, federal, and world tax. Because, of course, the world currency, you need a global central bank who's going to charge a global tax. And then Americans will wake up and they'll say, oh, my God, it all happened. It's happening right now because the special drawing rights that are being used right now as part of this huge reconfiguration of the European banking system and the $1 trillion that the U.S. gave Europe to unwind their banks' risky positions. Part of that is the introduction of another $300 billion in special drawing rights. So the special drawing rights are creeping into the global currency system. At some point, they will be comparable to other major currencies in terms of the amount traded and the scope and the influence. And then you'll start to see things quoted in special drawing rights, and they'll normalize the special drawing right, and then it'll be announced that as part of Bretton Woods 2, they're going to reconfigure the global currency grid. The U.S. dollar will be devalued by 50% like it was in the 30s. Gold will be upwardly valued to $5,000 or $10,000 an ounce. And then people in the U.S. will have a deferred awakening, because since World War II, they've really had the benefit of they've had the World War II dividend, which is stretched out for 60, 65
and they just
years.
expect
and they've enjoyed this incredible period of benefits as a result of having this incredible system where their government, the U.S. government, can write checks that they never have to cash, because every time the check is due, they just write another check. And since the world runs on dollars, there's always somebody willing to take a bad American check. Now, as soon as that situation ends, as it is happening right now, you'll have this incredible shock, and then it'll be way too late to do anything about it. So I can understand why people are in a coma when it comes to understanding the position of the U.S. relative to the rest of the world. And I can also anticipate that when this thing finally makes the break, there's going to be an incredible gasp of horror that'll just go from coast to coast. There will be absolute shock. How did this happen? But it's happening for all the reasons you've been talking about for the last 10 years.
And the banks will say, the big mega banks will say, don't worry, we're going to save you again. With SDRs, we're transcending national currencies, and we'll just make up to the power of infinity whatever amount of fiat money we want, and you're going to pay us taxes on the right to use this new global cashless society system, and they'll just bypass the 3 global regional currencies that the Trilateral Commission talked about in the 1970s, correct?
That is basically correct. In other words, with the introduction of the special drawing right, they will have another way to add another layer to this global Ponzi scheme where all of the U.S. dollar-denominated debts will be re-securitized. Most of the debt will be off the balance sheet. Some of it will be included in the new SDR, but the SDR will be loaded up with more debt than even the U.S. dollar, and the result will be this constant downward pressure from above where no wages ever go up, no savers ever get a return greater than 0.0001% on their savings, and you end up in this casino gulag state where the only way anyone can make any more money than subsistence.
Stay there. Got a break. Stay there.